now. All right, so thank you everyone for joining. We're welcome here with Leila Miller, who is a Catholic writer and author. She speaks a lot about Catholic teaching on marriage, family, and human sexuality. She is also part of the Catholic Answers group, and she's 8 kids, and loves talking about politics as well from a conservative perspective. She has published 4 books on raising kids and marriage, as well as on divorce. So today she will be talking with us about some of those topics and taking our questions after. Thank you, Leila.
I'm so sorry. Hang on.
No worries. Did you get kicked or?
Here we go. I'm not sure what happened. All of a sudden you started to cut out, and then all of a sudden it completely kicked me off.
Oh.
So I am back, hopefully to stay.
All right, sounds good. Well, if you could begin with a short introduction on what we're going to be talking about, that'd be awesome.
Sure. So again, just to kind of tell you a little bit about me, I'm a revert, I guess you could say, to the Catholic faith. When I was about 27, I finally fully started to research and understand my faith. I had 3 kids at the time. We were already done with kids at that point, or so we thought. Thankfully, God had other plans, and my Jewish husband actually converted and was baptized on my 30th birthday when I was his RCIA teacher. So we both had real conversions of heart, and so then we had 5 more children after that. We now have 10 grandchildren. Our youngest child is 10. So we kind of went straight from kids into grandkids, and we're still raising kids too. So I have raised a couple of generations. My first few kids were born in the 90s when
Oh, hello.
I'm back. This is going to be fun. I have no idea why this is happening.
No.
I'm too old to be technologically savvy. So, oh boy.
That's all right. We'll take what we can get.
Are you hearing me okay right now, though?
Yes.
Okay. So I don't know where my monologue stopped, but where was I when you all stopped hearing me?
I think you were just
raising children in the 90s. Was the last
thing. All right. Raising children in the 90s, before the kind of corruption of before social media came on the scene, before TV shows for kids were full of LGBT stuff. So that was kind of the first group of my kids. And then now that I have younger kids, it's a whole different ballgame, because you've got social media out there. Everything now is about LGBTQ and a completely disordered type of culture. So I see the difference in even what you need to do with your kids. It's really crazy out there. So I feel for all of you. It's difficult being Catholic, and that's okay, because we're supposed to be persecuted and we're supposed to be different and all that. But so basically what I want to say is that when we look at any issues of marriage or human sexuality or any of the things that are really the hot button issues out in the culture today, I always say this is how I simplify everything. You've got to go back to God's created order. So you've got to go back to the garden. And I've broken it down for myself, because I need things simple. My brain works in a way that it has to make sense. If things don't make sense, then it can't be of God, because God is not the author of confusion and chaos. He is the author of order. And he has set up an order to things and an order to his creation. So I never knew, raising my first bunch of kids, that when I taught them about the moral law, for example, that I was teaching them on the basis of natural law.
You're breaking out again.
No, I'm breaking out again.
Now we're good. Now we're good.
Okay. Oh, it says it's unstable, Mike. Hey, John, do you know anything about getting this Zoom thing stabilized? Here, come down here for a sec. I'm gonna pull down my teenager. Oh, it sounds
Idea.
good now?
Yeah, you're good
Let's see.
now.
Oh gosh, why is this going in and out?
Yeah, maybe if you
Okay.
were a little closer to your router, or
Yeah, the only thing I could do is, do you know why the Zoom would be breaking in and out? No. Want to come say hi, John? These are all young people like you. This is my, you gotta get down here. This is my son, John.
hello.
I wonder if I set it up on, the router is upstairs, right? Is that where the router is? Oh, gosh.
Corner of your room.
Oh boy. What if I use my iPad up there?
That'd probably be better
You
because you're
think so?
closer to the router.
I could use my iPad up there. Do you think
Yeah,
that
I
would
think
work?
if you're
I mean,
closer to
it
the
works
router.
down here, but
Yeah, I
okay.
mean,
So let me try that. So should I just sign out and?
yep. Yeah, you
head
can do that. Yeah,
upstairs?
we'll wait a couple minutes for you to join back in.
Okay. All right. I'll be back.
All right, sounds good.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
John should join the.
Okay. And it's, wait, let me see. Whoa. Did that work? Well, I'm going to try. Okay. Why is it? It's going to make me look off to the side. That's weird.
All right, we can hear you and we can see you. So.
Okay. I don't like San Francisco, but what on earth? How do I get rid of that?
Very in line with what we're talking about.
Yeah,
Wow,
exactly.
It is. Yeah. Everything bad comes from Northern California. So, okay. All right, here we go. I guess we'll just try it this way. Let me see if I can, that's weird. All right, let me center myself. Okay, so, anyway, well, you can hear me. So I had, in my mind, I can't remember where I was, the way that I made sense of things for teaching my own kids, or the basics, especially when things started to go a little crazy in the society, was I went back to the garden. So the garden, God, and I always say this too, you've got to make it simple. So God is also radically simple. He's not only ordered, but he's radically simple. And when I mean simple, I don't mean there's a lack of depth, obviously, but this is not a complicated thing to know the moral law and to understand how God made us. So I always go back to what are the things that God did in the garden with regard to the creation of human beings. And there are three things that he created, or three things that happened in the garden related to the creation of humans. One was the creation of human life itself. Okay, that's pretty simple. So life itself, human life, was created in the garden. Another thing that was created in the garden, again, before the fall, was marriage. Okay, Adam and Eve were a married couple, and that was the first human relational thing that ever occurred, was this relationship of marriage. And the other thing that he created, obviously, was he created them male and female. So those three things are what are under attack. That's what Satan was targeting back then, and that's what Satan is targeting now. And so you can see it very clearly. I mean, break it down. Life. Obviously, we know from abortion that he is targeting human life. And if he can get us to not value human life, then that's one check mark. Yep, got that. So what do we have? We have legalized abortion. Okay, he got that. He got that from the garden. Now Satan has destroyed that, that idea that life is sacred. Then we have marriage. Okay, there are three parts to marriage. If you want to think of the essentials, like what makes marriage, what is essential to that relationship? And there are three things. One is permanence. Okay. One is that it's generative, it's procreative. And the other is attached to that, that it's conjugal. It's a male and female coming together. So you have now in society, we have ripped marriage apart. All those three things, think about it. So marriage was permanent, but now we have no fault divorce. Okay, marriage not permanent anymore. It's temporary until you're not happy. We have contraception, which takes care of the generative or the procreative part. So we've gotten rid of that essence of marriage. That's the second thing that we've accepted and we've destroyed. So that's the second one. There's the third one, which is conjugality, and we've destroyed that now with gay marriage, because now we say, well, marriage isn't even conjugal. You don't even come together, the way that God designed. So we have destroyed marriage completely on all three fronts. So we've got abortion, we've got divorce, contraception, and gay marriage. And then the last thing in the garden, well, what do you know? The last thing that God created, or the last thing that we're going to discuss that we know he created, was that he created them male and female. So now with transgenderism, you don't even have that anymore. So he has wiped this, Satan has wiped that clear in our psyches and said, we don't need that. We don't need male and female. In fact, what is male and female? It could be anything. You could change daily if you want, but it all really depends on what you want and what you think, and it's not rooted in any created reality. So always go back to the garden. When you want to know how he's targeting human beings, well, he's targeting how God made us, how he created us, and that created order. He wants it wiped out. And JP2 actually said that that the secret to understanding original sin is understanding that Satan wanted to abolish the fatherhood of God. And that's the secret plan. That's it. If we don't see God as our father, Satan wins. I mean, he'll win all the souls, and bring us all to hell. So if you can keep that in the forefront of your mind when you go through any of these issues of human sexuality, or the cultural issues that you're going to face, if you bring it back to the garden and now you know what the devil's plan is. He's just undermining those things. It's not complicated. It's not complicated. In fact, I always say this, if you, I know you're not all in America, but when you guys are too young to know kind of this thing with gay marriage, it kind of ramped up slowly. And over the years, people would say things, but even the Democrats back in the 90s when Clinton was in office, they were fighting for real marriage, for natural marriage. Hillary Clinton was championing it. I have quotes from her just saying, this is, that marriage from the mists of history has been about a man and a woman coming together to have children and raise them and bring them up in society. I mean, it was perfect. It was like she might as well have been a Catholic at that time with her definitions. And so over time, because it's sneaky, the devil's a little sly at first, he'll introduce things that seem absolutely preposterous or evil. He's not going to just throw it on us immediately. So slowly we got used to this idea. Now, when gay marriage came on the scene legally, when it happened, that I think it was June of 2015, that we had the Supreme Court say, yeah, marriage is no longer between a man and a woman. It could be between two men or two women. What you'll notice is Satan always overplays his hand, and he gets bold, like, okay, I've taken this, I've taken marriage, I already got abortion, I got contraception, divorce, I got all that. Okay, now I've got conjugality here, I've got marriage. And within, I would say, weeks of that Supreme Court ruling, the transgender stuff started. It was uncanny because it wasn't happening until then. Nobody was talking about transgender. It didn't kick in until they got gay marriage. And so the devil knew what was left, and then it started to go very, very quickly. So unlike the gay marriage stuff, which took decades, this transgender stuff just came on really quick. So I always say, look for the certain words or characteristics of when a movement like this happens, and you'll see the devil's spirit. Like if it's frantic, if it's frenetic, there's a lot of F words, frantic, frenetic, frenzied, fierce, ferocious. There's a lot of violence in getting this transgender thing going. And it was very quick. And if you opposed it, you were evil, you were a bigot, you were horrible. And this is like, wait, let me catch my bearings. I mean, we've literally had, the entire history of mankind where no one thought anything of, oh, that's a man and that's a woman. And now we're expected to just completely throw that out, just completely. And if you don't throw it out immediately, you are a terrible, horrible, evil person, just like that. And, connected to nothing that came before. And it's the characteristic of the devil, to cut you off from everything, to say that you're crazy, to make things chaotic and confusing, and then to accuse you while it's happening, even in the very basic things. such as male and female. So again, I go back to the, male and female is so basic. That's how he's overplaying his hand, because it's so basic in nature that it's the first thing we remember about someone we meet. It's the last thing we forget. For example, you could go shopping and you couldn't remember the clerk's name or the clerk's hair color or, really anything much about that person, but you would know if you were talking to a male or a female. It's that innate. And so the last thing I'll say about this, and then we can, start having discussion here. Has everyone seen The Passion of the Christ? Yeah. So what's really interesting about that is that he made the Satan character very androgynous. If you notice, you're kind of like, is that a woman? Is that a man? You can't tell. And it's very unsettling. And actually, I don't even know. I don't even know if the actor was a male or female. I think it might've been a woman, but the voice, it was just very, you didn't know. And so there was this unsettling feeling about the unnatural part of the Satan character. And that's for a reason. And there's a reason that we feel uncomfortable innately with that, because it isn't natural. That's not how God designed things. And that would be a good way to portray the enemy of God, is just as someone that you cannot identify its nature. It looks human. It's not what. And so, so just that unsettled feeling. And then what we're trying to get people to do is, with all this stuff that we feel unsettled about, we're all supposed to say it's wonderful. And it all goes back to kill marriage, kill people, and kill how God created us, complementary, male and female. And then you will absolutely kill fatherhood, because all of those things have to do with fatherhood. And if you kill the fatherhood, of humans, you're going to kill that understanding of the fatherhood of God. And then he's got you. Satan has you. So that's why this is really, like I say, it's simple. It's not complicated. He's not that tricky. Satan's not that tricky. He's smarter than all of us, but he's not that tricky, really, because we have God and we know how he made us. So, so that's a baseline, and that's your argument always. That's just, you go back to that in your mind. You teach your kids that. You make sure you marry someone who understands all that, and there's half your battle right there, just knowing this. So, anyway, so that's my baseline for anything else that we could talk about. So, any questions?
Yeah, so feel free to unmute yourselves or type up something quickly in the chat if you have any questions.
Oh, and I can't see my chat either. That's the other thing. So if there is a chat, someone will have to tell me what it is.
Yeah,
I'm still in the clouds of San Francisco, just disconcerting.
Does anyone have a question?
I've left you all speechless. I said everything. Nothing needs to be even discussed anymore.
I know. Let's see. Give people time to gather their thoughts. Isaac, do you have a question?
Not yet.
Okay. I just saw that you were unmuted.
I'm trying to come up with one. I just got here like a minute and a half ago.
Oh, you missed all the meat. Wow.
Yeah, I was late.
Well, we had some technical difficulties.
Quickly, which of these things do you think, which of the things you mentioned, like contraception, abortion, or gay marriage, which do you think results in a false society most quickly? Because I found it interesting that I don't believe this, but it's interesting that abortion was a step to gay marriage and it wasn't the other way around. That's interesting.
Well, and yeah, notice, this is so interesting to me too, because I do spend a lot of time on social media, that when you see abortion being pushed, on Twitter or wherever, you almost always see the rainbow flags with the same, with the people who, which is ironic, isn't it? I mean, there's no possibility of two gay people creating a child that needs to be aborted, and yet it's very connected to those two agendas are almost always linked. Like Planned Parenthood is huge into LGBTQ stuff, and but again, it makes sense when you think it's all one thing. It's really all one thing. And it's funny that you asked me, you know, what do I think is the most detrimental, or what can bring, what was your question specifically? What can affect society
Yeah.
like
What can
the
affect
most
society
harmful?
to the most negatively? Which one of those?
So I'm going to maybe say something surprising, and I would say divorce, because broken families, and when we ushered in no fault divorce in the 60s, and when families started to fall apart, and this is kind of my area of research now, has become divorce and the children of divorce, because I had no earthly clue about the damage that is done, because I'm not from a divorced family, and I'm not divorced, and I don't really have there's not a lot of divorce in my extended family at all. So for the first 50 years of my life, I kind of just thought, well, you know, it's terrible. Yeah, we're against it. Yeah, it's bad. But I didn't know until I started talking to the adult children of divorce, you know, decades even in, how much damage there is, and there always is, even decades later. Like it's the most painful thing I've ever heard in my life. I have trouble sleeping some nights, because now I'm kind of the person that everybody comes to talk about when their parents got divorced when they were 6, and now they're 57, and they still haven't gotten over it, and they think they're the only person suffering, and they suffer in their marriages. And get this, I've talked to a lot of family life, the heads of family life of the diocese here in America. I do some conference calls with them and such. People affirm to me, and in one of my books, Primal Loss, where the adult children of divorce give their stories, or answer my questions, the people who have abortions, the women who have abortions, are almost always from broken homes. And so, and I've had that confirmed by a lot of the family life people, that they're dealing with, you know, Rachel's Vineyard, or all these programs to help the devastation of post-abortive, you know, women and syndrome, and the men, and they will say the same thing, like, oh, we never really, I mean, most people don't put that together. I did once I wrote the book, but they do, because they work with them. They say, oh yeah, almost all have come from a broken family. Otherwise, there's something really bad maybe that has come from the family. But generally speaking, even the people I interviewed, the women, some of them have had 2, 3. I think one woman had I think she had 3. But a lot of them who have abortions are from the broken family. So it feeds, you know, it just feeds the culture of death. It feeds the dysfunction. So if you want to have broken people, you're going to get a lot more broken people from broken marriages than you are from abortion per se, because obviously you're going to have the dead children from abortion. But there are so many millions and millions of children of divorce that then are so wounded that they go forth, you know, trying to find love in all the wrong places, and self-abuse, and hurting themselves, and self-esteem issues, and all the other things that you get a whole bunch of abortions out of that. And I will say this too. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say for sure, and the thing about it, the other thing is, like, for most of the other movement, for most of these other like things they're pushing, there's at least some sort of countercultural movement against it. But for divorce, like, you really don't see much of that unless you're Catholic.
Right. And I would say, and this is where I get, I'm well, yeah. So I get some controversy here, but I'm on the cutting edge of also trying to explain to Catholics, because I used to be one of them, why divorce is as bad as it is, because we even faithful good Catholics don't see the damage, because, you know, everybody's supposed to, the whole culture, and even in the church, is like, well, but everyone's going to be fine. And so then we just help people move along, and so we can sweep it under the rug, and then the kids don't get to have their voice at all, and they hear from all the adults, well, you're going to be fine. They hear that from the priests, they hear that from therapists, they hear that in the schools, they hear that from the adults in their lives, and so they don't say a word. So that's why it's very secretive, and nobody really knows the damage, but it's very severe. So, and I will tell you this too, even the LGBT issue, when you come from a broken family and your identity is gone, like your identity is shattered. Once your family's gone, you're now split 2 ways. And you're grown up before your time. I mean, and you have to emotionally caretake your parents, and I mean, there's just so much to it. And then you have to see your parents with new romances, and you might be 10 years old. It's very hard to navigate this, and you have to navigate it for the rest of your life. But when you're a teenager, for example, and you have lost your identity as this family unit, what's going to fill that vacuum? Well, there's another family out there ready to take you in, and that is the LGBTQ family. Because the LGBTQ family, to their credit, they know how to accept people. They know how to say, you're good, we love you, we're your family, we will never leave you. You can always count on us. And so I see so many kids of divorce now, and I also deal with the abandoned spouses, and they'll always say, but now my kid's coming out as gay. My kid's saying, she's a man, all these different things. And I say, well, yes, because they're in a turmoil. They've shattered their foundation, and they're looking for an identity. When the culture, and again, this is Satan, when the culture says, I have your identity is you're gay, or your identity is you're not really a girl, you're a man, you're a guy. That's their new family. They couldn't count on the old one. The old one fell apart, and they can count on this one. So it feeds. So the divorce, the broken families, that's why JP2 said, the world, the future of the world and society and the church will come through the family. It's if we have healthy families, we're going to have a healthy society. If not, we're going to have a society that's in complete dysfunction. And that's where the cracks are. And that's where Satan very happily steps in.
Sure. Absolutely. You said priests, and when they're not hearing it from their priest or from their church, they're even not hearing it from post-apostolic exhortations, but I won't go there. So we'll start with some people from the chat have questions, but we'll start with most related to least related. So for divorce, can someone ask, what are your opinions on annulments in the church between Catholic couples?
Funny you should ask. I just wrote, so on my blog, this is the kind of, do you guys know what the third rail is? It's a third rail topic, which means you don't touch it without getting electrocuted, because on the subways, there's a third rail. You never want to touch the third rail. So annulments in the church is a third rail topic. I touch the third rail. I actually touch it. And I'm not ashamed to say that I do. I only write on this issue when I have consulted with tribunal people and canon lawyers and people, because I'm not an expert, but I need to know, I need to know that I'm on good, firm ground rather than just giving my opinion. I think statistically we know, and it's really not that hard to figure out, that there were, I think before the 60s, there was one year where there were 360 some annulments a year in America. And now we're up to over 10,000 a year. I don't know. It's like, and it went that way overnight. I mean, one year to the next. And it's not that hard to understand why JP2 and Pope Benedict criticized American tribunals to the Roman Rota. I mean, they said, they're on the record. You can look this up. Again, I got some of it on my blog, where they said, hey, basically something's going on, and you're doing something a little bit off in America. And so what we've done, and again, I always go back to this, and people don't get that upset. I think people now know it. Ever since a couple of years ago in the church, the Summer of Shame, people understand there's been, and this is biblical, so we're not scared of it, but there's a lot of corruption in the church. The church has been infiltrated. The church has a lot of bad people in it. And so if we can say, well, catechesis got corrupted, and we can say liturgy got corrupted, and we can say the seminaries got corrupted, and we can say the hierarchy we know got corrupted, well, then wouldn't we be able to also say some of the other institutions and entities have also been corrupted? And some people have admitted that the tribunals, which have a legitimate place, they have been corrupted. And there is a culture in the American tribunals now that is very much for the customer. So one tribunal worker told me, we're working on and he didn't like it. Believe me, he's fighting within the tribunal he's in, but he said, it's the customer model now. So when someone says, I'm done, I'm done, I'm ready to move on, the church is generally an agent of help to move along, to move on. So when you have no fault divorce, so if let's say you have two people in a difficult marriage, and in the culture pre-Vatican II, pre-1960s sexual revolution, what did the culture say and what did the church say? You guys got to work it out. You got to work it out. You're going to have to work harder, and but either way, this is your cross, and you're going to make it through, and you get through to the end, and usually God pulls out an amazing story of love in the end, if it's been miserable. I've got those stories in my latest book, Impossible Marriages Redeemed. Happens all the time. But now you have the opposite. You have people who get upset, and they think, by the way, that marriage is about romance, and if I don't feel good, then I must not be getting my needs met, and therefore I didn't meet my soulmate, and therefore he must be out there or she must be out there. And you have no fault divorce, which guarantees that you're out. Nobody doesn't get a divorce. Nobody is told by the judge, nope, you can't get a divorce. No, every single person who wants a divorce, whether they're innocent or guilty, will get a divorce. So there's a greased exit ramp out of the marriage. Then you have the church, which says, in America, says you have to get a civil divorce before we'll look at your marriage validity. So the church is actually requiring civil divorce in the nightmare of family court, which blows any goodwill out of the water once you've gone through that. And then, and only then, after you're civilly divorced and ruined your finances and your everything, only then will they look at your case. And then once they do look at your case, I think that many of the dioceses have 99 to 100% affirmative. Yeah, it was invalid. We agree. And these are people, again, I mean, there's some things that are cut and dry, like lack of form, and that's all that's canonical law. That's just 2 weeks to say, yeah, you were married outside the church or whatever. That I understand more, that's a cut and dry objective standard. Even though let's hope that we could convalidate more of those and not break up a family, but okay, that's another subject. But for the ones who got married in the church in the last, again, 50 years, some of these annulments are happening after 30, 40 years, which is just crazy. You've had 8 kids, you've been active in the church, and then all of a sudden, someone has a midlife crisis or whatever and decides to leave. To annul that, which happens all the time, it almost undermines what does the mission of the church, which says we're the guardians of the sacraments. We've said, yes, this is a sacrament, but then if you want out, we're pretty much almost going to give you an out. We're almost always going to say, I guess it wasn't a sacrament, whoops. So what does that say to the kids? I go back to, again, the kids then say, there's something very wrong here. And most of the kids at that point, especially if they're in their teens or younger, they will not stay Catholic. There is no reason for them to stay Catholic, especially if they see the church in their mind being complicit in the breakup of their family. So yeah, there's an issue. And I think I've had 3 interviews now with tribunal officials who will speak off the record about what's going on in the tribunal. So that's a whole nother area that no one wants to touch. And for whatever reason, that's kind of what I'm knee deep in that. So yeah.
You wanna find out if I can get you in trouble? Do you think people that are getting these divorces, do you think that they're living in sin if they get remarried after a tribunal says it, if it's for an invalid reason and they knew it was an invalid reason beforehand?
Okay, that's a good question, and it's got a couple parts to it. First of all, I always tell people who are remarried after annulment, assuming that they were honest in their dealings, that they were honest and they answered the questions honestly. I always tell them, be at peace, because the jurisdiction is with the church. The church has the jurisdiction. That doesn't mean the church is right when they make a decision, because a declaration, Cardinal Burke has said this, a declaration of nullity is not an infallible statement. It is the best moral judgment, it's supposed to be the best moral judgment of the tribunal. And that's why there's appeals. You appeal then, if you disagree, you appeal to the next level, and then you can appeal to the Roman Rota, because it's not infallible. You're just trying to get the best information. So let's say someone in good faith is told, cooperated as they should or whatever. Maybe they were the respondent. Maybe they didn't even want the annulment, but they were the respondent. And they're like, I don't want to be alone for the rest of my life or whatever. It's very hard to be someone who stands for your vows because nobody's supporting you. And then they get remarried in the church or whatever. They have a canonically valid marriage. The church has vouched for that marriage. And Christ said, what you declare on earth, what you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven, and what you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. They have the canonical jurisdiction to say what is or is not a valid marriage. So I would say no, that they're not in sin. However, here's my caveat. The tribunal workers themselves, I've heard some undercover things where, one tribunal lady in Ohio was caught on tape saying, oh yeah, engineers, attorneys, and I forget what other accountants, they don't really have the emotional ability to be married. What? Oh, so now no accountant, engineer, or attorney can be married validly? I mean, this is the kind of thing that they're searching. Some people are searching for a way to get people onto the next romance, just because that's what they do. That's what they're doing. So would I say that person is culpable for bad judgments and for handing an annulment to someone that didn't qualify? Yeah, I'd say woe to that person. I would be very afraid to be some of these people. The other woe is, woe to this person would be someone who manipulates the system, and many people would. I mean, if you're kind of, you got divorced, you're not really that even into your faith necessarily, but you're enough that you don't want to go to hell and you want to get your annulment, you could embellish a lot of stuff about how, well, I didn't tell you about that time he raised his voice to me before we got married and I was afraid, and then I, or something like that. And you could really embellish. People lie. People do lie. That's a human foible, and that's a sin, and people do it. So in that case, if that person knows and knowingly lied in order to trick the tribunal into giving them some sort of, I was so scared to get married, or I really, really didn't want to, but I was forced to, or, which is that's not really done. And in fact, well, don't get me started on that. But anyway, so that could be something that they could be culpable for, that they lied, but they'd be culpable for that lie, and then, fooling the system, so to speak, because the system should work. The system is supposed to work. There are true impediments, and though that's what the system is for. So yeah, but I would say most people out there who are in good faith, did they do the right thing? Maybe they should have tried harder. Yes. Maybe the tribunal got it wrong. Yes. It's unfortunate, but we are where we're at right now, and we can only do what the church says. So, I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks. Also, it reminded me, isn't there a verse that's something like, if you lead the least of my little ones into sin, it would be better if you had like a stone tied around your neck and thrown into a lake or something?
Yeah, the millstone. The millstone.
Always keep that in mind.
People don't. I just had this discussion with someone that people really don't fear hell anymore. They don't think they're going to hell, because what is it, Dan Burke, who said something? There's 3 things he said about people. I wish I could remember the other 2, but the first one was, we have an incredibly high capacity for self-deception, and so people think they're doing great if you're not advanced in the spiritual life, because again, we're not taught that either. We're not taught about the stages of holiness. We're not taught about what each stage looks like, and when someone's still grappling with mortal sin, they're back in stage 1, the purgative stage, and we should be moving through these stages, and no one's even taught us that there are stages. So we just think we're treading water. We're like, well, okay, I got baptized and I'm a pretty good person. I haven't killed anyone, and nobody's preaching to me that I might go to hell. They're assuming I'm great. So they're trying to build up my self-esteem about how great I am. So so we've kind of forgotten that when Jesus spoke about millstones and Gehenna and and wailing and gnashing of teeth and not being prepared, and I never knew you. I mean, you don't want to hear that when you die, but I fear that people will, and the negligence of the hierarchy is going to be, it's a fearsome thing. I just keep thinking about the bishops who have a lot to account for. it's going to be scary. And I
Yeah.
just think we need to pray hard for them, but also pray for all the souls that they're leading astray.
Mhm.
Thanks
Yeah.
for your answer. Will you ask one of the other questions from the chat, or Jakob?
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, we have
Go ahead,
another question on divorce, actually. So someone asked that so they said their aunt got married in a Jehovah's Witness hall, and then she got a divorce, and then she got remarried again, but outside of the church. Can she receive communion? Do you know?
If she was in Jehovah's Witnesses hall, then she'd never be able to receive communion.
Yeah, the question, I would need a lot of information. I'd need to know, first of all, was she baptized Catholic? And then she, because if she was baptized Catholic, then she had an obligation to be married in the church. So then that Jehovah's Witness ceremony would not be valid. Now, it could be valid for a Jehovah's Witness. It could be valid, but not sacramental. But it could be, it's either, every sacramental marriage is valid, but not every valid marriage is sacramental. Because there's natural marriage too. God created marriage for everyone, not just for Catholics. But so I need a lot more detail. Like, was she baptized Catholic? Is she still...
Yeah, she was.
Okay, so she's
Yeah, she
baptized
was.
Catholic. So
And
meaning
she
that.
received communion and confirmation too.
Okay, so so her first marriage would be invalid, and her second marriage would be invalid. The question is she with her second
Yes,
civil
her
husband?
second partner. Yes.
Okay. So then, no, she would not be. She would not be able to receive communion because she's not in a valid marriage. So she would need to go to confession, and she would need to separate from her husband or get married for real to her current husband, or live as brother and sister. Another option, would be, just can't live like a married couple. But no. At this point, I mean, I'm assuming that she's living as if they're married. Then no, she would not be. She would not be
Okay, thank you
eligible.
for answering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
We have
actually
another
raises
question.
another question. Just quickly, could you explain what living as a brother and sister is?
Yeah, and it's interesting because some people have a real controversy about this too, which I didn't realize was controversial. I'm learning so much even in the last couple of years of this work. But yeah, so just ceasing all sexual relations, and usually these people have children. So the problem is, really what should happen if you're not married to someone is you should not be living with them, right? I mean, that's scandalous in itself if you're not married to someone. But generally speaking, when people realize, oh my gosh, I don't have a valid marriage, or they have a conversion of some type or whatever, they've got this information now, you don't want to put the kids also in a situation where they're suddenly in two different homes, unless, of course, the person is going to go back to their first family. I mean, again, it's so complicated because we make, with our sin, we make such a mess, and other people pay the price for our sins. And usually it's the children. It's the children for the first marriage, or the children for the second marriage. But someone is getting hurt badly and getting abandoned in some sense from what they were supposed to have. So, so living as brother and sister would mean you could live in the same house, let's say, because you've got these kids you're raising, but because you're not married, you have no right to sexual union. You have no right to be sexual with that person at all. It's not your spouse. And so therefore, all that has to end. That has to end. It's like you're living with your brother or your sister. And I have known people who've done that, who've been very willing to do that once they realize that God is, offended by adultery or fornication, which is what it would be if there's no marriage. So people I've known couples to do that. But again, I mean, then every situation is different, and that opens up another 10 million questions, because there's always complications and questions about that. So for specific issues I could answer, but otherwise it's just a general, it just means you can't have any sexual relations at all. No romance with this person that you're not married to. So.
All right, great.
Thank you. Vanessa asked the next question, and she asked, what do you think about Catholics taking birth control for reasons other than contraception? Like, for example, I personally know people that think it helps with like acne, or there's some really strange medical condition that only like a birth control pill will help with like effectively. So what do you think about people taking it for reasons other than contraception, basically?
I think it's incredibly imprudent, and I don't think it should happen. I think that is there moral leeway? Well, yes, in the sense that any hormone or medication is neutral and can be used for treating a pathology if there's a pathology. The problem is this particular medication is not good for women. It's not good. It would have to be very proportional. Like what could justify something that would be a really, well, first of all, it was actually made to do something immoral, right? That was the purpose behind it. But let's say, okay, it's just a hormone or a steroid. We give it to girls who aren't even done growing. We give them this hormone that actually tricks their body into thinking it's pregnant. That's what it does. It covers up the pathology rather than fixing it if it's a female issue. For acne, I can't even imagine that that's worth, risking strokes and blood clots and weight gain and migraines and, all the other mood swings and everything else that happens to a woman's body on the pill, especially a young girl who's still growing, a teenager usually. I think it's extremely imprudent, and there's no reason for it because there's always another treatment for whatever it is that is happening. You may not get a lot of doctors who know these other treatments because they're all taught to just any female issue or anything, just put them on the pill. But it's very much worth digging for a good Catholic doctor who knows to treat a pathology with something that can fix the pathology. In the case of women's issues, and in case of acne, there's other treatments. I mean, you can do other things rather than pretend they're pregnant perpetually and pump them full of steroids. We don't want our sons on steroids. We always say, don't go on roids, this is dangerous. But, we're going to put these girls on steroids. And one other problem, which I'm sure, because you guys are young, you probably know this, and you met my almost 16-year-old son, but my 19-year-old son is so horrified by the good Catholic girls who are on the pill for their acne or whatever it is. And it's just that much easier for them to become sexually active. Mm-hmm. And in fact, some of these good Catholic girls and their parents are complicit and say, we got to put you on this for this or that condition. And the parents aren't aware, I guess they're that clueless, I don't know, but they aren't aware that their little girl isn't really acting like a little girl anymore. They're actually out there fornicating. And that makes it easy. And so there's a lot of clueless parents. I can't even understand it. But yeah, it's bad. I would say no, no, not necessary to do that. Even if there is a little leeway in the moral law to do that in some circumstances. But why would you?
Yeah. Caitlin asks, what are your thoughts on IVF and how it has played a role in the destruction of the family and destruction of sacredness of human life?
Oh gosh. IVF. Yeah. So I have a whole chapter, Trent Horn and I have a whole chapter on IVF and reproductive technologies. It is so horrible. These kids, well, first of all, IVF has several possibilities. It could be that the mom and dad are the biological mom and dad, even while they use IVF. Okay, that's the least offensive way to do this mortal sin of IVF, is that at least this child, who is, if it's allowed to be born, because of course, how many abortions, really, that's the death toll from IVF is boundless because of the frozen embryos and because of the selective reduction once some embryos grow, and then, there's too many, so now we've created them, and now we're going to kill them.
Yeah, the person who asked this question is actually a child
who is
from
an
IVF
baby.
Yes.
So, and I want to be very sensitive to that, because my son, this is now my 22-year-old son, I have a lot of sons, but his best friend from high school, and he's like a son to me, is an IVF baby from a donor egg. So, and his mom who bore him, because he doesn't know who his IVF donor egg mom is, but his mom is one of my very, very, very best friends in the world. And she was told by a Catholic theologian, when this is before I knew her, when she was trying to get pregnant, she did 17 rounds of IVF. None of it took. So she never stored any eggs because she knew enough not to do that. She never stored any embryos. She almost died a couple times. So right there is a risk to the woman, just incredible risk. She had miscarriages, ectopic pregnancy. She almost died from an allergic reaction to all the hormones that they have to pump. It's so unbelievably unnatural. And then when she had her son, it was from a donor because they figured out they couldn't do it with her eggs. She was getting old or whatever. So he's a wonderful, wonderful boy. Love him so much. He knows his origins. It's very difficult. Then his family was divorced. He was an only child, and then they divorced. So he has a lot of issues. He has a lot of identity issues. He's in a lot of pain. He's wonderful. I love him. He's struggling a lot. His mom is fully contrite over all of it. She's one of the holiest women you'll ever meet. One of the things that happens with IVF too, and then there's a whole, I don't know if you guys know of anonymousus.org, but a lot of that, those are the donor kids who are the result of donors and IVF and all that. And they tell their stories anonymously because there's a lot of pain there too. It's like the children of divorce. You're not allowed to say that there's pain there, that your origins are so primal. So for you to not have your origin and your rights, they were not protected from your conception. Your conception was supposed to be that you were conceived through the love of a mother and father who were married. That's how God designed it. So, but they're not allowed to say that because everybody tells them, but you were wanted. Look how wanted you were. Look how loved you were. And so you can't say anything bad about it. You can't say, but I'm hurting, from my origins. But the other thing with IVF is well, I want to be sensitive, but even how they collect the man's semen, I mean, it's another mortal sin. I mean, you've got mortal sin upon mortal sin, and there's nothing, it's not the way God intended. So just like a child of rape, just like a child of fornication, just like a child of, IVF, same thing. God did not intend for people to sin to bring about children. However, and this is the big part that we all know, that doesn't touch the dignity of the child. The child is the good that came out of the sin. And so that child is very much loved, very much still made in the image of God, which is why we say we don't believe in rape exceptions, for example, for abortion. We don't care how the child was conceived. The child is still precious, just like every other child, and is supposed to be here just like every other child. What was not supposed to happen was the sin. But it's very tricky because Catholics don't realize necessarily that it's a sin. They don't think about it. They think it's very pro-life. It's very pro-life. We want to have children. We want to make these children. So that becomes very much a moral quagmire as well, that we've confused everything in our minds. And, but yeah, so the child is beautiful, wonderful. Like I said, one of the greatest people I know. I love him like a son. He's as precious as my own children. But yeah, we cannot tell an untruth and then say that the means by which the child came into being was moral.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Caitlin says that the feeling that comes along with being conceived through IVF is a little different than like rape and fornication, as with the latter two, the conception was the result of the sin, while with IVF, the conception was the sin.
That is an interesting way to put it. Wow.
Yes.
Yeah, there is the mode of conception, right? It's yeah. It's very unnatural. Like it must, I think that is kind of the, we have decades and decades now of millions of children of divorce, so we can hear their stories. We don't have that many decades yet of millions and millions of IVF kids. And I think that her voice is important. Like that would be something that if she's brave enough to talk about that, we need to hear it, because people brush that one under the rug like nothing. So there's a real need to hear that. And it's hard. Just like with divorce, it's very hard because you love your parents. And that's the other thing that's really difficult. You don't want to harm your parents. You don't want to hurt them. You don't want them to make them feel terrible. You don't want to harm your relationship with them as you grow older. So it is, but notice that with all these sins, who's hurt the most? It's always going to be the children. It's always the innocent children.
Yeah, for sure. So we have another question from Jacob, and Jacob says, how do I explain to someone the church's position on people with XXY as their 23rd chromosome?
So, yeah, we talked briefly about this in the book, and we have always known scientifically, objectively, that there are some anomalies in biology, in people being born with congenital issues, with intersex conditions. Those are congenital issues. Those are issues of biology. So the church has never denied any of that as being true, as being something that science, really can help with, can look into. Usually, and I'm not an expert on all the different conditions or chromosomal issues, usually when there's a confusion somewhere in a congenital or chromosomal problem, there's a dominance, either one way or the other, boy or girl. And to that extent, science can usually figure it out, like what predominates. Even if someone has both sets of genitals, male and female, usually one predominates. So, and you can do blood studies, or you could do chromosomal studies and things like that. Like that has always been the case. So the church has always understood that. And that's a result. That's a result of the fall. Everything that is a physical, what we call theologically, physical evil, unlike moral evil is sin. Physical evil is things like hurricanes and, disease and congenital issues and
Everything
all
in
that.
California
So,
now.
yeah, my gosh, wow. And that's a whole other topic. Boy, we could talk about that. So the church doesn't deny that and say anything about that. It's just like, yep, that happens. What they want to lump together, a lot of times people are lumping that together with what is the vast, vast, vast majority of what we call transgenderism now, which is just simply someone who has a perfectly fine male body or a perfectly healthy female body and just denies that that's what they are and wants to be something else and wants to amputate or, pump themselves full of hormones for a change. Completely different situation. So the church understands the former and the church rejects the latter. It's just that simple. So unless there's something more specific about the question, but yes, no denial. There's no denial from the church that there are congenital issues that lead to sexual confusion.
Yeah, great, thank you. So Julie asks, can you explain how homosexual tendencies can be Catholic or Christian without taking part in same-sex marriage or relationships?
Okay, can you clarify the question? Can you read it again?
Yeah, so I think one second. She's asking just like how so how can people with homosexual tendencies remain as active Christians if they are, if they identify as being part of the LGBTQ community? So like what roles can they take in the church if they can't marry someone of the same sex, or if they can't, take part in those, transgender clubs and activities or stuff like that?
Mm-hmm. So everyone has their own or his own temptations, and to have an inclination to homosexuality, to be attracted to the same sex, is a heavy cross. It just is. There is no different rule for them than anyone else. There's no different rule. There's no, I always say this too, there's no special sin. Nobody's sin is special. Nobody's sin is gets a special pass or is so much more an obstacle to holiness. You can become a saint just like everybody else, or you can embrace your sin to your detriment, just like anybody else with their temptations. For some people it's adultery, for some people it's theft, for some people it's alcoholism, whatever. So the question is, I want to reframe it a little bit, because what we've done is we have said, and this is a lie of society again, we have said that those inclinations are somehow part of our identity. And so as soon as the culture shifted from behavior, from it being a temptation that could lead to a behavior, and they shifted it to, oh, no, it's an identity that we have to just fight against, or that even though I was made this way, I have to fight it. As soon as we went from behavior to identity, we lost the battle. Because when someone says it's a part of you, then you wonder, why is God so mean, that he would make this a part of me, that it's who he made me to be, but then he doesn't want me to be. So we have to go back to the mindset of, no, God made you either a man, or God made you a woman. And that's all you need to know about your innate sexuality. I'm not talking about your temptations. I'm just talking about who you are. You're either a man and you have male sexuality, or you're a woman and you have female sexuality. That's it. And your temptations are something separate. You're going to have to fight temptations your whole life. I will also say, but again, to make it your identity, you will be fighting that. And then if you really believe that that's your identity, if you don't really say, no, I reject that as an identity, even if I intend to be chaste, I'm still going to carry this identity. No, you can't. It's not your identity. Your identity, you're baptized, you're a son or daughter of God. I mean, you're a beloved child of God Almighty. And you're a male or you're a female. So there's also this other thing which says, well, but then, if I have these temptations, I can't get married in the church. That's not true either. There are people in the church who have temptations to the other sex, to the same sex, who do get married to the opposite sex. Everybody, as long as that's disclosed and everybody understands what's going on, and that was, how I felt, or that's the temptation I had, and the wife or husband is aware of this temptation or whatever, there's nothing that says ironclad, you cannot be married and have a family at all. In fact, one of the stories in my latest book, Impossible Marriages Redeemed, is Doug Mainwaring, and he writes for LifeSite News. He is same-sex attracted. He divorced his wife because he was same-sex attracted. He said, I'm gay. And then he saw the devastation that he did to his family. And he said, wait a minute, what am I doing? And he went back, and they are still happily married now. He's a very holy man. So that's a misnomer too, that we can't be married. If someone doesn't want to be married because they just are too tempted in the other direction, and they just can't imagine bringing that into a marriage, they might hurt the spouse, or, it could be a problem. Holiness is attainable even as an unmarried person. I mean, even St. Paul himself said, his preference is stay unmarried, serve the Lord. So it's like any other cross. It is the way that you are sanctified. Your cross is how you will be made holy. And so you can look at it that way, and it's actually something to be to thank God for, because when we don't have our crosses, I just saw this. There's this really great, I'm sorry, I'm like babbling now, but there's this really great video I saw that was released on Sensus Fidelium, I think just like 3 days ago, about holy self-hatred. And it was so good, because it isn't about hating yourself, in the way that the culture talks about. But this holy self-hatred, one of the things he talked about was St. John of the Cross said the only times that he felt abandoned by God was when he didn't have a cross. And that's because Jesus said, follow me, pick up your cross and follow me. You can't follow me unless you're carrying your cross. So he felt abandoned when he didn't feel a cross. And now in this culture, we feel the opposite. We feel that if we have a cross, God has abandoned us. It's exactly the opposite of that. So.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You
The
also,
next question. Oh, go ahead.
all right. I was going to say that you mentioned that they can get married, with to the opposite sex and have a family and have kids. I know that there are some people who think who wonder whether a single you know man or woman who does have that attraction, but and they don't want to get married to the opposite sex. Some people say that they should be able to adopt kids, right? If they want to just raise them on their own, they don't want to get married and something. What's your
Right.
opinion on that? Or
So, and I always try to go to what is the church's thought on that. So we know that the church says no to gay couples adopting. That's just nope. That's just child abuse. You can't put a child in that situation. But I have just in general, the idea of a single person adopting a child. I had one lady once ask me, because I was very involved in the adoption community for a while, and she said, I'm single, but I'd really like, I don't know if she was same sex attracted. She just didn't have a husband. And I'm very devout. I'm very Catholic. I want to adopt an infant. Can you help me? And I remember saying to her, no, I wouldn't help you adopt an infant, because there are so many heterosexual moms and dads, married couples waiting years to adopt an infant. And every infant has an absolute right to be in as something as close to what God intended as possible. Every adoption, we know, and gosh, tons of people I know who have kids who are adopted, as you do. Every adoption is born out of a loss, because there's no reason the child would be needing a family if there wasn't a loss of the original family in some way. So either through death or through sin, something happened and the child needs a family. So this is about the child, and for the child, adoption is a restoration of what was lost. And so that's why it's never about the parents saying, I need to have this child because I feel I want. It's not about that. The child has the right to have as close to what God intended as possible. And so for an infant, with lines and lines of moms and dads waiting to adopt, because we abort all the children, right? There are no infants, really. There aren't many infants for adoption. So there's no need for a single mom to adopt an infant. Now, some people would say, well, what about foster care? These kids, they languish. And I would say, yeah, they do languish. And so that I'd be more open to the idea of, like, yeah, okay, if no one wants to adopt this, group of siblings or whatever, and there's a loving, wonderful single parent, that's a different story, because you don't want them languishing in foster care. The other problem, though, is the foster care system is so broken that oh gosh, the what they do now is they're actually prioritizing gay couples to take kids out of foster care first, to adopt them first, which is just so wrong. And they're throwing up obstacles, and I know this because I've dealt with a lot of the Christian and Catholic families who do foster, and they want to do foster to adopt. They throw up obstacles for Christians. Catholics, we've had to close some of our adoption agencies and foster agencies in America because of the LGBT laws. So it's so prohibitive to get a couple on their end. Financially, it's difficult. Emotionally, it almost kills you, because a lot of times they're reunifying these kids back into the really broken families that they came from, and they're injured. They're like, you had this kid since, they was 2 and now it's 6, and it's going back to its drug addicted single mom, whatever. And it's very hard to get people to buy into that system, because people can't take it. They can't take it. So, and it's very, very difficult because it's stacked against Christians. It's stacked against normal heterosexual families. So the whole thing is so messed up that when people say, and I bring this up only to say, because people will say, well, gay people, for example, if we're talking about couples, let's say, they, you just want kids to languish in foster care. It's like, no, we want to make it easier for those kids to get, because more couples, heterosexual couples, would adopt those foster kids. I know plenty who want to. I know plenty, I could tell you my personal friends who want to now, but can't do it because the system is too difficult to navigate. And so the problem is with the system, not with the fact that nobody wants to adopt these children. That's just not true. So, but yeah, so it's a question of, no, I wouldn't say for an infant. No, I would not say that for anyone, any single parent, whether they're same sex attracted or not. I would say that there are plenty of families that want them with mom and dad.
All right, great.
Sure.
Will, do you have the next question?
Yeah, Addie asks, this is pretty big. She's a lesbian sister, and her sister is getting quote unquote married. So how does she tell her sister that she can't attend the wedding?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh gosh. So I did an article recently for my blog that was about parenting and how difficult this would be for a parent to say that. But I can now appreciate that it would be very difficult for a sibling as well. I would frame it in terms of, well, first in your own mind, you would say, I know what Christ said, that he absolutely said, if anyone loves father or mother, son or daughter, and we can add sister or brother more than me, more than Christ, then he's not worthy of me. So we know, okay, I have to choose Christ. That's a given. And it might estrange me from my family. It might actually break me from my family. What I find has worked and could work, if people are respectful of what in the way they say they are of people's, if they're open-minded and they have, we're all supposed to respect each other, right? You guys were taught probably from forever in your generation that everything is about just, hey, I got to respect you for what you think and what you want. Everybody's tolerant, right? Everybody's tolerant of everybody's ideas. So I would say this: it's not that she's going to not love her sister. It's not that she's not going to be friendly and just as loving and wonderful as always to her sister. But there's this one event, because it violates our faith. There's this one event that I can't go to. First of all, I'd put it on myself. I'd say, I can't offend God. I'm sorry, this is my Catholic faith and I can't do it. My allegiance before anyone in my family is to God. And I have to stand before God alone. One day I will have to stand alone before God and account for why I went against my own beliefs, or why I went against him. So for your own sake, in your own self, you can put it on you, there's my phone. I don't know. But the other thing I would say is that, so then it's not about them. It's not about judging, oh, you're just so terrible, you're awful, and I can't believe you. But the other thing is, I've noticed that if people try to manipulate others in the family to go to these gay marriages, ceremonies, whatever they are, they usually say things like, well, I'm being rejected by my family. My family doesn't love me. My family doesn't care enough. They don't love me. They are rejecting me. I look at it the other way. I'm thinking, wait a second, how come it's only one way? Like, I'm supposed to do what you say and go where you want me to go and affirm what you want me to affirm in your decisions, but you don't have any obligation to respect my beliefs. My belief simply says I can't, this is an age-old belief. It's not something new. This belief has been firm and in place for millennia. So where is the reciprocity? Like, oh, okay, I respect you as a person. I can't respect this decision. That's fine. I can't go to this event. Okay. You also kind of, maybe it would be nice if you respect my Catholic deeply held beliefs, which is that I have my beliefs too, and let's respect each other. And where you can't agree, that's fine, but let's agree to still love each other and not say, oh, that means you don't love me. It means, you're so mean. Or no, I'll respect you. I can't do this. You respect me. You can't do that. Okay. Maybe that person can't go to mass or confession. I mean, I don't know. I mean, you're not forcing them to do that. Right. So I think it has to come back to the people who want respect and want you to tolerate and love. They need to be also held to that same standard. And I don't see that when I see Catholics being forced, manipulated, emotionally manipulated into agreeing to something that goes against their faith. So you can try that angle too, which is just let's respect each other's beliefs.
For sure, that makes sense. Last question. Allie asked, is it still considered living in sin if a person has a roommate of the opposite gender, even if they're not in any romantic or sexual relationship?
That is such a great question. And I've pondered that question because today we would all just say, no, it's not a big deal. Sometimes it's for finances. You've got a roommate. Maybe you're a single woman and you want protection, so you have a guy be your roommate or or whatever. So I don't have a clear-cut answer to that. I know which way I lean, and the way that I lean is to say it could give scandal. It could be it could eventually be a temptation. I mean, I don't think it's prudent to be roommates with someone of the opposite sex. I just maybe I mean, it's kind of like even the question of dorms. We used to have dorms that were, you didn't stay on the same floor with others of the same sex, I mean, of different opposite sex. And now you could be in a room next to someone at college that they're all mixed up, even though you're not in the same room, you're next door. But that still has not been, it kind of blurs the lines. I don't know. I think it's, I don't know if it's prudent. And I think it could be scandalous in some ways if people don't know what's going on. So
Sure.
I just steer
Isaac's
clear of it. Yeah.
Isaac's actually in here, and he has an apartment, and
With a guy.
he didn't want this, but there's a couple cohabitating with him,
Yep.
roommates, just for financial.
I'm living with an unmarried couple.
Oh gosh. Yeah. I mean, I can imagine that is uncomfortable. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I don't know. I've got my own little room. I don't leave my room unless I'm
Yeah.
meetings.
Third wheeling to a
Yeah.
new level.
Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, that's tricky. I mean, it used to be, I'm sure there were a lot more clear-cut cultural norms, and now it's just kind of, since everything goes, it's just, and maybe, I mean, that is, there's room for prudential judgment on how you deal with that. So.
Yeah, perfect. Well, that was the last question. I don't think anyone else has any more questions, but, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate, you taking your time out of your day to sit with us and answer all our questions. I think we all learned a lot, so thank you.
You guys are great. I am very hopeful.
Will you end us with a prayer, please?
Sure. You want me to?
Yes, please.
Absolutely. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, thank you for the gift of these incredible young Catholics on fire for your faith, zeal for your commands, and really the hope for your church. And I am so grateful to be able to know that they're out there. I ask you to keep them safe, keep them holy, keep them on the narrow path, make them great saints who can influence their families and their friends and their communities and even their priests and their parishes. Guide them through the path of holiness to union with you, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. And just keep them in your tender care and in the care of your Blessed Mother, Mary, who loves them so much and is so active, even when we think that we are abandoned or alone in this very chaotic world. She is with us always, and she's right there with her Son. And for everyone who they will reach and who they will teach, bless them as well. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you so much, guys. You're wonderful. You're wonderful.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
God bless you all.
Thank you, you too.
Yeah, you too.
Take care.
Thanks.